Hey everyone, welcome to the first video in my series of long-form character recommendation videos, Quick Recs. First up is none other than our boy Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, aka the Man Without Fear. My favorite comic book character and long-running series. Daredevil has a lot of great books, a lot of great runs by a lot of different talented creators. Excited for the new show? Enjoyed his cameos in recent MCU projects? Are you just interested in getting into the character? You've come to the right place. If you've seen my TikToks, you know that in my short form Quick Rec series, I try to give you 3 complete stories you could just pick up off the shelves right now and get into without having read a bunch. So that's what we're going to do today before we get into the rest of the video. Here's 3 Daredevil books you can pick up right now. Number 1, The Man Without Fear by Frank Miller and John Romita Jr. This is pretty much understood as a definitive origin for the character. This came a few years later after Miller's original run on the title. He came back to the character, similar to what he did with Batman Year One, to retell his origin and modernize it. And that's exactly what he does here. If you actually go back and read the original Daredevil comics from the 60s, you can see the parallel plots, and it's fun to see how Miller takes those ideas and Millerizes them, I guess is a good way to put it. And Romita Jr. does a really good job here. I know a lot of people are very critical of his work, but I would argue that while that may be fair, this is up there with some of his best work. In this book, he subtly shifts his style to have that grit and grime of old Frank Miller art. It's really cool. Number 2 on the list is Daredevil Yellow, an excellent miniseries by classic creative duo Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, another entry into their Color series at Marvel, along with Spider-Man Blue and Hulk Gray. This is a great look into Daredevil's early years. It does also cover a bit of his origin similar to Man Without Fear, but in a drastically different tone. It has this beautiful sort of nostalgic golden age tone that just works so well. It's a recounting of the early days of Daredevil, the early days of Nelson and Murdock, and the introduction of Karen Page. It's such a beautiful story. Check it out. And the last book on the list is Daredevil Born Again by Miller and David Mazzucchelli, the sort of conclusion to Miller's run and highly regarded as one of the best comics of all time. Born Again is the ultimate Daredevil story. Every comic fan should read it. Kingpin makes it his mission to ruin Matt Murdock's life, and that's exactly what he does. This book really kicks off the trend where it becomes a writer's job to drag Daredevil through the mud as hard as you possibly can. Oh, and I haven't even mentioned Mazzucchelli's art, which is just transcendent. The way he depicts the citizens of Hell's Kitchen, the world of Daredevil. It's beautifully brutal. It's a must-read. Check it out. Okay, so getting into the long-standing runs of Daredevil, we've already covered some of it, and it's pretty obvious. First up is the Frank Miller run. This is the best place to start, as before Miller, Daredevil didn't really have the look and feel of what we know today. He was your pretty standard costumed adventurer, and he was missing that street level grit and grime, that crime noir quality that Miller brought to the table. He essentially came onto the title and reinvented it from top to bottom. He really elevated it to where it is today. So here's the reading order: Daredevil number 165 and 166, then we jump to 168 through 191, and then that last little section, numbers 226 to 233 is Born Again, wrapping up his run on the title. And we go right into the next run by legendary creator Anna Senti. Unfortunately, her run is often looked over by comic book fans, and I think that's because of a few reasons. First, she's following up on comic book royalty with Miller, and she's a woman in a male-dominated space that is comics, especially at the time in the 80s. And also, for some reason, a lot of her run just isn't collected both physically or digitally, which is frustrating for Daredevil completionists like me. Her run doesn't have complete collection editions like other runs, which is unfortunate because it really is a great series and really important for the character. If you've ever read Senti's work before, it has this sort of fever, dreamish quality. Not all of it is super linear or straightforward, but it works so well. She has that angry political quality to her writing, similar to Miller, and you can certainly feel it in her Daredevil run. She attempts to tackle some pretty complex issues in her run. The issue about factory farming is certainly a highlight. Also, the biggest thing to come from this series, this run's legacy, comes from the creation of Typhoid Mary, now a classic part of the Daredevil mythos. Mary started out as a half-love interest, half-adversary of Daredevil, and certainly continues the trend of ruining Matt's life in new and interesting ways. This time, it's his love life we go for. Great stuff. Definitely check it out. Here's the reading order: Daredevil number 236, then we jump to 238, and then 245, 247 through 257. and then 259 through 291. A lot of this run's hard to find, but there are a couple of epic collections that collect some of it, and I would say definitely pick up the Touch of Typhoid one for the most important stuff. The next really important few books come in the form of a couple miniseries from the Marvel Knights initiative from the late 90s and early 2000s. First up is Guardian Devil by Kevin Smith and Joe Quesada. This is a really important story in the history of Daredevil. There are some major shakeups in the mythos in this one. The only thing I'll say about this story is that it is very 90s, from the art to some of the story beats. If you can look past that, it's definitely worth checking out. And then the next miniseries to come out right after that one in Marvel Knights Daredevil is Daredevil Parts of a Whole by David Mack on both writing and art duties. This is a beautifully depicted story by Mack. It has that painterly quality you come to expect from his work. This is the introduction to Echo, Maya Lopez, who has gone on to become an integral part of the Marvel Universe with books like New Avengers. She's recently debuted in the MCU in Hawkeye, and now she's getting her own show, which could end up being really cool. Definitely check this story out. Moving on, the next big run, also spinning out of Marvel Knights, is Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Maleev's run on the character. This is probably my favorite Daredevil and one of my favorite runs in all of comics. Bendis and Maleev take what worked about the Miller run and really modernize it. I'd say the tone is most similar to the Daredevil show, really expanding on the crime noir aspect of the character. Bendis plays around with the identity, does some real interesting stuff with that idea, and Maleev's art just takes it to the next level. When I think of Daredevil, I think of Maleev's art, the way he draws DD, drenched in red, the closest thing to an actual devil man. It's just so pretty to look at, to pour over every page. It's excellent stuff. Definitely check this one out. If I were to recommend only one run out of everything on this list, it would be this one. Here's the reading order: Daredevil Volume 2, numbers 16 through 19, 26 through 50, and 56 through 81. And another thing that's great about the Bendis run is that it leads perfectly into the next run by Ed Brubaker. Yes, the next big run by Ed Brubaker follows up perfectly to where the last one leaves off. You could read it all as one big, long run, and it's just pretty much just as good. And Michael Lark does a great job on art. His style is very similar to Maleev's, so again, the illusion doesn't really break going from one book to the other. We all know Ed Brubaker as an excellent crime novelist, a great crime noir writer, and that certainly is the case here. His style translates perfectly for the tone of Daredevil in this book. His first arc on the book, The Devil in Cell Block D, is easily one of the best Daredevil stories of all time. Daredevil in prison, it's just so cool. Here's the reading order: Daredevil Volume 2, 82 through 119, and then 500, which is a great one. And I will say, this run ends on a sort of cliffhanger for the next big run on the title, which is pretty much an entirely skippable era for the character, and it's a bummer because the new status quo did have the potential to be really cool, but just unfortunately led to one of the worst Marvel events, Shadowland. Daredevil leading the hand and basically taking over Hell's Kitchen, turning it into like feudal Japan styled. Really interesting idea. I think it had a lot of potential, but unfortunately it falls pretty flat. So we're pretty much going to skip it entirely and go into the next run after this one, which would be Mark Waid's wonderful run on the title. Waid completely flips the book on its head and returns DD to a more fun Golden Age costume adventurer feel. I know for some Daredevil fans, this isn't really for them because it is so tonally different, but I would say it is definitely worth giving it a try. It's an excellent series that stays true to the character and who he is, and still has and sticks to those usual themes of Catholic guilt and that dark depressive side Matt has. It's still all there, just in a very different package. The art in the series, from Javier Rodriguez to later Chris Samney, is just all incredible and fits the tone perfectly. The reading order for the series is a bit wonky, as it's split into two separate volumes, even though it's all pretty much one series. It starts as Daredevil Volume 3, numbers 1 through 36, and then also Daredevil Volume 4, numbers 1 through 18. The next run following is the Charles Soule run. This is definitely a return to the darker, grittier side of Daredevil, definitely a stark difference against the Waid run, and I really do like this book. I definitely don't think it's Daredevil's strongest series, but I don't have too many complaints. It's just good, and there's nothing wrong with that. You've got some great art in here, starting out with Ron Garney drawing a black suited Daredevil, which just looks incredible. I'd love to see the suit in live action one day. Later you get Phil Noto art towards the very end, and it's of course spectacular. This run is also the introduction of Daredevil's oft-forgotten sidekick, Blind Spot, who is actually a pretty cool sidekick. I don't think Daredevil needs a sidekick. I think that's pretty weird, but the character on its own is pretty cool. But after this book, he's pretty much immediately forgotten, which is kind of unfortunate. The reading order for this one's pretty simple: Daredevil Volume 5, numbers 1 through 28, and it switches to legacy numbering, and you have numbers 595 through 612. Next up is a really fun miniseries, Man Without Fear by Jed MacKay. It's meant to be a sort of stopgap between the Soul book and then the next run. It's not necessary to read, but I think it's really good and definitely worth checking out. A very introspective look at Daredevil at one of the lowest points in his life. Plus, it's Jed MacKay writing Daredevil before he blew up into Marvel stardom. He's actually my choice for who I want to take on the title, since at the time of this recording, the current book is wrapping up soon. And speaking of the current book, the next big run is Chip Zdarsky and Marco Checchetto's run on the title. This started back in 2019 and it's still going strong today. At this time, we're not 100% on when this book is ending, on what number, but they are teasing that number 12 is the beginning of the end. So yeah, this is an excellent series for the character. It's a little too recent to say, but I think in a few years, we'll be putting this right next to the likes of Frank Miller and Bendis as some of the best Daredevil stuff you could read. It's so good that there are already lots of rumors circulating at this time that the new show Born Again is going to be taking inspiration from certain ideas in this book, and I'm not going to give away which ones. Zdarsky's voice for the character, his voice for Kingpin, his voice for Elektra, his depiction of the world of Daredevil and Hell's Kitchen, all great. And Marco Checchetto and art is just perfect for this book. It fits the tone in the world so well. I mean, just look at how he draws Daredevil. His design for Elektra's Daredevil is instantly iconic. His two redesigns for Daredevil's outfit are both excellent, the first one probably being my favorite look for the character. You get some great stuff in here. Like I said, this is the introduction of Elektra taking up the mantle of Daredevil. Also an actually excellent Daredevil event in here, Devil's Reign, that actually succeeds at being a street level event that still has a big impact on the larger Marvel universe. Kingpin as mayor basically outlaws vigilantes and declares war on superheroes. Such a brilliant idea and really harkens back to the early kind of 2000s gritty grounded Marvel feel with things like Dark Reign or Civil War, and it just works. It works in his event, but it also as a continuation of Daredevil's story. So getting into the reading order here, this one's a bit complicated as this run is also split up into 2 volumes, as well as an event and a separate miniseries. It starts out as Daredevil Volume 6, numbers 1 through 36, and keep in mind there's a really crucial annual in here, Daredevil 2020 Annual Number 1, that should be read between issues 21 and 22. Usually annuals are pretty skippable, but this is essential reading to understand things going on later in this book. Then after 36 starts the big Devil's Reign event and miniseries Woman Without Fear. The reading order here gets a bit complicated. Definitely do not go by release order, you will accidentally spoil some things for yourself. Instead, I found this handy dandy reading guide from the Daredevil subreddit. Shout out to everyone over there, especially the moderator Green Devil. He helped to put together a lot of the reading guides and stuff over there, which has helped me out when I was newly getting into Daredevil, and also it's just a really cool community. So yeah, here it is. Devil's Reign number 1 through 2, and then Daredevil Woman Without Fear number 1, Devil's Reign number 3, Woman Without Fear number 2, Devil's Reign 4 through 5, Woman Without Fear number 3, Devil's Reign number 6, and then finally Devil's Reign Omega. Marvel for some reason loves those Omega issues these days. Then the series goes back to regularly scheduled programming, back to a new volume and new number 1, Daredevil Volume 7. The series is still ongoing. Daredevil 11 is the most recent issue to have come out during the time of this recording, and it seems like 12 is either the ending or kickstarting the ending. But yeah, that pretty much completely catches us up to today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully this helps you guys out, get some new Daredevil fans out there, gets new people reading this wonderful character and all of his great books. So yeah, if you like this video, give it a like if you so choose. I plan on doing more long-form character recommendation videos like this one, but for characters like Spider-Man, Batman, Moon Knight, Nightwing. So make sure to subscribe and stay tuned. If you're familiar with my TikTok or YouTube shorts, I already have a few shorter quick recs videos for those characters, if you're interested in that. But besides that, this is Cam's Comic Pulls. This was a complete Daredevil reading guide. Hope you guys have a great day. Peace.